Hi, everybody. I am Sue Hillyard, and I am here with Rav Chahal, and we are doing our next episode in our series of up close and personal interviews with your favorite astrologers. And today, our favorite astrologer is Arielle Guttman, and we are just pleased as punch to have her join us today. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Likewise, I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. I know you had done a couple of videos with our group when Linda was with us, and she facilitated, and they were very educational. You talked about what the Venus star is, and then you did one a couple of years after that about a specific Venus star. So it was we'll put a link to that in the description of the video. But um, why don't we start with a question of what drew you to astrology and how does it show in your chart?
That's a good question. Um, uh, what drew me to astrology was basically I came to it in a little bit of a roundabout way. I had never really had much exposure to it growing up. I just came from a community and a family that just didn't have any much of a relationship with astrology at all. But in 1973, I've told this story a few times, but I'm really happy to tell it again because I just celebrated a couple of years ago the 50th anniversary of that. It's just my discovery of astrology. 1973, I was not really full-time student anymore. I was not really sure what I wanted to do. I was really searching. I didn't know what I wanted to do actually. So I decided to take a trip to Europe. And so I was backpacking through Europe for about 6 months that year. And when I got to Greece, which was my last stop in Europe, I started in the north in England, and then I kind of worked my way across the continent, and I wound up in Greece at the end. And I was traveling with somebody. At that time, you would meet people in different cities, like at the hostels, the youth hostels, and somebody would say, "Well, I'm going here and I'm going there, and where are you going?" And I said, "I want to go to Greece," and I met somebody there at the hostel in Germany who said that he was going to Greece too, and why don't we travel together? So we did. And he turned out to be a Greek mythology major from UC Santa Cruz. So, and I remembered when we were talking a lot on the trip, I remember, so mythology was one of my favorite subjects in school. I wish we had gotten more of it. We only got like a little bit of it. I would have loved to kind of expand that whole subject matter, but the course curriculum didn't really allow for that. Uh, However, when we got to the Acropolis in Athens and up on the hill there, we were talking about mythology and Athena, the goddess Athena. And then he just started talking about astrology and asked me if I knew anything about it. And I said, I know I know my sun sign, I guess. I'm a Cancer, but I don't know what that really means. I mean, I know we're supposed to be sensitive and all that. Water, it's a water sign. I said, I do love the water. Um, anyway, he just really started talking to me about astrology and mythology and how they were connected, how the planets were actually named from the Greek deities, and the planets that we use now that have the Roman names. And it's like it was like a seed planted in my brain, and I couldn't let go of it. And when I got home from that trip, I decided I was going to start I started collecting books on astrology, whatever literature was available at the time. This was like 1974 by then. And I found a little book called Write Your Own Horoscope by Joseph Goodavage. I don't think it's still in print. It was a little paperback book, but I managed to figure out how to calculate my chart from the book. And then I saw a class come up. I was living in LA at the time. I saw a class come up at a sort of a night class that had these different subjects, and one of them was astrology. And I said, I'm going to sign up for that class. I would really like to learn more about it. So the teacher put my chart on the board that night. And I said, yeah, I had already calculated my chart. And, but I was one rising sign off from the book because I didn't include daylight savings time. I didn't know about daylight savings time. So, but she said, no, you're actually this rising sign instead of that rising sign. So, um, I always thought I was Taurus rising from the book. And but she said, no, you're Aries rising. So, okay, I'm Aries rising. So I had to wrap my mind around that. Oh, okay. You know how we get really comfortable thinking of ourselves as a certain sign or whatever. And then suddenly somebody tells you, no, you're not that sign. You're a
What?
different sign. Like Aries, are you kidding? And at the time, I really couldn't see the Aries. I felt more Taurus. I really did feel more Taurus. And um, anyway, I love beauty. I love, sensuality. I felt very Venusian, Taurian. Um, I love, beautiful things, colors and fabrics and textures and things like that. I thought I was Taurus, but
That
she said,
sounds very
nope,
Taurus
daylight
to
savings
me.
time. I know. So Aries, are you kidding? I'm not fast at all. I'm not, but I am impatient. I do want to kind of get to it, and I do kind of leap ahead. So, I've grown accustomed to being Aries rising. So I guess that's true. I mean, unless somebody publishes a book someday that says, oh, that was all wrong. Actually, daylight savings time wasn't happening, and you really are Taurus rising. You just never know. But the funny thing is that I think we've all had experiences when we've read for clients, um, they didn't have the right birth time. And later they come back to us and they say, gosh, I found out my birth time was, several hours off. It wasn't that at all. Or it might have been AM instead of PM. And but then they want to know, why was the reading so accurate? How come it was so accurate if the data was wrong? And that's kind of that one of those mysteries of astrology that is a little bit difficult to answer to the people who want a scientific answer to it. Like, if you're using the correct data, you're going to get exact results on that, and that's going to fit the model. But if you're using different data, it's going to be something completely different. But then there's another factor at work with astrology, and I think that is, there's an intuitive element, there's a little bit of magic that comes into it. It's not just straight old science and math, watching the movement of the planets and calculating the exact precision time. I think also when you're with somebody, you're picking up on what's important in the moment, and you're talking about that. And that is the missing element in astrology that I think many people don't register or don't always think about, because we're trying to be so accurate with our interpretation, that we forget that it's actually a mystical science. I would say it's more in that department. Yeah.
Do you know
So
what, Arielle? I'm glad you've mentioned that.
long answer to your question about how did I
Yeah.
get involved with it. It sort of found me, I had different people in my life at that time. I was living in LA. I had different people asking me my sign. Do I know my chart? Do I, oh, here's a book. Somebody just gave me this book on astrology and I don't know anything about it. Here, I'll give it to you. It just sort of like it when something it's like at the right moment. That synchronicity that Jung talks about, that also astrology is so synchronistic. When you're in the right place at the right time, everything just converges to help you um, further along on that path. So books started flying at me, and people that could speak that language started showing up in my life, and classes appeared. And it was like that old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So I was ready. I was ready for something. And that really answered my question. And the really funny part of that is I just recently finished my memoir of that journey, of that 1973 journey. I wrote it in 2023 on the 50-year anniversary. And I did the chart for the takeoff, the flight taking off, to Europe. That's the only thing I had really recorded, was what time, from my journal notes, what time the flight took off. And Uranus was at the midheaven of that chart. And I didn't even think of that until I was writing this, and I looked at that chart again, and I thought, I was going to Europe to try to find myself, to try to figure out, is something gonna inspire me in terms of what I might want to do with my life? Because at that point I just didn't really know. But the chart knew, Uranus knew. There it was, Uranus on the midheaven from the moment I left for the trip chart, the trip of my lifetime, basically. That at the end results of which was that I was going to study astrology and eventually become an astrologer.
How
So
Uranian.
Yeah.
And
But
and we were talking about before
yeah,
we started recording, you were talking about the asteroid Urania is prominent in your chart, and Uranus is near your midheaven. And so I mean,
yeah,
the time was right. And
yeah, Uranus. My midheaven is actually the Sun Uranus midpoint.
wow.
good point.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that fascinating though,
To
Arielle,
be
that
exact.
you
Yeah.
you asked the question, like the question was in you when you were traveling, when you went to travel. So you kind of let it out to the universe. What is my purpose? What am I here to do? Like where is everything going? And
Yes.
how typically Iranian, where it's like something you never planned before, astrology, even mythology, probably until you got to Greece. So have you seen, this is a question that I just come to my mind. Have you seen any links with Greece in your own birth chart? Do you know, in terms of it being a land of that kind of reawakened a path that you were meant to go down, like in
Yeah.
terms of your soul
I'm living in
purpose?
Greece now.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to get back to Greece. I've been coming back to Greece ever since that first trip in 1973. I
Yeah.
think uh, I think it's funny because when I got back home, I had gone to, like, 11 or 12 countries that year on the trip, and everybody back home, when I got back home, and I was gone for 6 months, so it was a pretty extensive trip. And people were all asking me, well, what were your favorite countries in Europe? And I said, actually, the Netherlands and Greece. And everybody was so surprised because they were expecting, normally what people, Italy, France, whatever, But no, for me, it was like the Netherlands made a very strong impact for me, and so did Greece. And from the moment that I stepped foot in Greece. It was very different in the 70s than it is now, of course. I guess every place is, but was really like more natural. It wasn't so developed and built up, and it was like, you walk around the old town in Athens and the ruins, you could like hear the voices of the gods speaking to you, and it was just really and every time I've come back, and I've made, I think I had made like 18 or 19 trips to Greece between that first one and the final one when I actually moved here
Okay.
4 years ago.
Yeah.
So I've been
Yeah.
coming and going from Greece. So Greece was a big part of it, and mythology was, and of course, two of my books were on, mythology and astrology, mythic astrology as well.
Yeah, that's the book that I was saying that I have, but I haven't read yet. I've started reading it, and it's really intriguing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that
Yeah,
is
and
that a
you mentioned to me earlier that you had interviewed Jason Holly recently,
we
and
did.
Jason, of course, is very steeped in mythology, the Greek myth, and astrology, and uses it quite well in his practice, and just weaves it together so well. And we've had discussions, Jason and I, about how important mythology is to the understanding of astrology, and to the um, like ferreting out the deeper implications of the planets and their archetypal meanings. So yeah.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, yes, he was the last interview that we did. So, and now we're following up with you. So
Yeah.
That's great.
that's
That's
great.
great.
Always a pattern. I just want to
And
go
we're
back
both
to
from
the
Santa Fe, by the way, too. We're both from Santa Fe, which
That's
is
right.
kind of another interesting connection.
Yeah,
yeah.
and you spent a lot of time in Santa Fe, didn't you? And being part of the
Um,
astrology
it's
community.
the place I've lived the longest. I
Mhm.
lived there for 35 years.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I've lived in a lot of different cities, but Santa Fe was really the place I lived the longest, and it's New Mexico is still the state that I would call home, the
Mm.
land of enchantment.
Yeah.
And it really is. It's still it's a special place.
Yeah. I just got a question regarding, because I know of you because of the Venus star point work that you do and the
Yes.
astrology that you do, and you mentioned Athena. Do you feel she was the starting point of that kind of energy and focus when you first went to Greece and all the subsequent times you've been to Greece? And I know that now you are in Greece. I just wanted to,
Yes.
that asteroid Athena, do you know where she falls in your birth chart?
Yeah, she's in a grand trine with my ascendant and Vesta and Pluto. And also, Athena actually rises. The asteroid Pallas Athena rises over Athens, Greece, in my relocation chart.
Wow.
Wow.
And it's the zodiacal rising point asteroid. There's also the Enmundo point, which Athena's a little further out. The Enmundo point rises over Istanbul, and the zodiacal point rises over Athens. And so I really believe that Athena was speaking to me that very first visit to the Acropolis. And every time I go to Greece, especially around there, I hear her voice. I get messages from her, and there's times that I have asked questions. I'm also very attracted to Delphi, the oracle at Delphi, and Athena has a temple there too. It's mainly known as Apollo's sacred precinct, but Apollo, the god of the sun, but Athena has a very strong presence there as well. And I've spent many, many, many hours sitting beneath Athena's temple there at Delphi as well. At the Acropolis, it's hard. to sit and have quiet contemplation with Athena, because there are like millions of visitors there all the time. It's just a madhouse. It's a zoo of people. But you can get some quiet time at in Delphi at Athena's temple, because Delphi is layered. It's up on the side of a mountain. And so, there's the gymnasium, there's the stadium way up on top, and then there's the theater, and then there's the Oracle Center where the gods, where the Pythias spoke, the Delphic Oracle. And then below that is on the lowest level down on that plane is the Athena temple. And it's a very huge area. And so a lot of people would gather there too. There were different things going on. It's an enormous site, and it's very beautiful. I've been taking tours, leading tours to Greece for the last, I guess, about 30 years now.
Wow.
That's part of my reason for coming back so many times, but other times just to come for my own enjoyment. But a lot of times, I've probably shepherded groups through Greece 10 or 12 different times now over the last 30 years.
And are you still planning on doing that?
Yeah. I do it. I have a colleague, Alexandra Karakostas, that I lead a lot of these tours with. She's a very good astrologer and is also Greek. And we design the tour, and the theme always matches the astrology of the time. Whatever the astrology is doing, so this one's really involving Neptune. Like our last tour was called the Alpha and the Omega, from the Alpha to the Omega, because of Neptune's crossing over from Pisces to Aries. We did this last year, and we started at Sunyon, which is where Poseidon's temple is, the sacred temple to Poseidon. And so a lot of our tours are geared to what the planets are doing, and we go to those particular sites for.
Nice.
I love it.
I do feel the tours are becoming a lot more popular. I've heard about them a lot more recently, and I do feel with Pluto's transit into Aquarius, I think people will be traveling to the lands of where these myths have been associated with, just to kind of embody the energy. And it's like you said, mythology it's into the psyche. There's so much deep material that I feel it's like the time it's being unearthed, especially if people follow astrology, and it doesn't matter what paradigm of astrology they follow. It's like there's an opportunity to hear, and Venus very much is the archetype of inner hearing. That's how, with evolutionary astrology, that's how we look at it, is the psychology of listening, and are you listening, and what's the message that's coming across? So I feel at this particular time that these tours are very prominent. I'm hearing a lot more about them. So it's yeah. So if anybody and whoever's listening is interested in your tours, we'll definitely put a link for your website and these tours that are coming up.
They can sign up for my newsletter. I usually announce them there first, or maybe on my Instagram page, which I can give you the link to all of that when we're finished.
Yeah, well, we'll put all of that in. So do you have a plan for the next one?
We have an idea. We don't know when yet.
Okay.
Right now, the world is in a little bit of turbulence. So we decided we definitely knew we weren't going to do one for 2025. 26 is now just around the corner, so we may not do one in 26, but it could be that by the spring. We usually like to do them in May, May, the end of May to early June or mid-May. It's beautiful time. It's not high season quite yet. Or we do them in late September into early October. We've kind of alternated with those two time frames. So we have to look at the astrology first to see if it's a wise time to do it, and then what the themes are astrologically in terms of what we'll talk about. But we do have an idea for our next itinerary. Alexandra and I have done 3 tours together so far together, but she did many tours on her own before we partnered, and I did many tours on my own before we partnered. So at one point we just, got to know each other and said, it's let's join forces. Let's do this together. I think we could make this really rich.
Yeah.
Um,
It sounds
and
lovely.
Yeah,
Something to look forward to.
yeah, it's very nice.
Once,
Yeah, I hope you'll join us sometime.
yeah,
Yeah,
that would be awesome. Once the world calms down a little bit.
definitely in a bit of a crisis right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to touch upon Saturn because we were speaking about Saturn before we started recording. And just, as all us three today are all Saturn in Virgo, and we were talking
Yeah,
about the transit of Saturn in Pisces, because it's opposing our Virgo, natal Virgo, Saturn in Virgo. Just how have you found that transit? And I know you spoke about it briefly, but just in terms of the work that's coming up, because Saturn relates to work and commitment. If you just can share your
yeah,
experiences with that.
right. Well, Saturn's in my 6th house. I'm Aries rising, so Saturn's in my 6th house, and it's always been work for me. But it's conjunct the asteroid Ceres in Virgo, and Ceres is really the mythological ruler of Virgo. Demeter is her Greek name. The goddess Demeter was the mother goddess of the harvest. She's the goddess holding the wheat. The glyph for Virgo is the goddess holding wheat. It's pretty clear that Virgo, and that's how it was in the ancient Olympian rulership, was that of the 12 Olympians, they had assigned a god or a goddess to each of the signs, and of the 12, and there were 6 female and 6 male deities ruling the signs. So I have Saturn in Virgo, whose mythological roots also were the harvest god. He did, it's the sickle. His symbol is like a sickle, and it's in Virgo. And my uh, Ceres, this goddess of harvest, is also in Virgo, and it's the sickle the other way. I mean, Saturn and Ceres are basically, it's like one turned the symbol, the glyph is one turned the other. And it's interesting because I have one of the things I love so much about Greece is the land, the food, the harvest, the freshness of the food, the whole Mediterranean diet, the whole idea that they've been growing this food for years and years. And I guess, I have to say, being a Cancer also, I love food. And part of my yearning to go back to Greece all the time was certainly the mythology and the sights, and also the sea, because the swimming is wonderful. The sea is so wonderful to swim in, but the food here it's just incredible. And I felt for the first time in my life, when I would have a meal in Greece, that I was actually nourished. I was really eating food that was nourishing me deep down my soul, whether it was a remembrance or whatever, but it awakened something inside me that was really, very primal, but very, very nourishing. And I and it's not that I didn't have good food growing up. My mother was a pretty good cook, but um, wasn't in the kitchen all the time. She was a career woman. Also kind of married to her work. So I think back to your question on Saturn and Virgo is I love the idea of um, the fresh and healthy food that's here. I kind of really love to eat healthy, and always concerned, connected to what's in the food, what are they putting in it. And the European Union has some very strong standards about what they will not permit in the food. So I do feel like that's helped me get healthier too. Um, and but the work too, obviously Saturn and Virgo in the sixth, I do have to maintain good health. It's always something that I have to watch. So, but also it's just the devotion. I think my work can sometimes consume me. I have definitely seen that when I'm in relationship, when I've been in marriage with people. I it's a hard, it's hard to put the work down and focus, just, to focus on the relationship, even though, I love having the relationship, but the work is pretty all consuming. And as we were talking before, the thing is, I think I used to say this to people with Saturn and Virgo, um, you have to find work you really love, because if you don't, you're gonna it's not gonna be worth it at all. You're just gonna make yourself ill. I love my work, so it's easy to overdo it. And I have to force myself sometimes to just take a break, get out of the office, get
Mm.
um, like on a Sunday morning, not going straight to my emails and saying, hey, I have to remind myself, today is Sunday, just take a day off, okay?
Go for a walk.
Exactly.
Get outside, get out in nature.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I feel the same way. When we were talking beforehand, I was saying that I had been in public service. That's how my Saturn and Virgo kind of played out in my professional life. Was I was, in public service in a few different jobs, and even in my last IT career was tech support. So I was, it was also service, but in a way, it was not exactly my calling. And so it really, a lot of times it did feel like work, and it would, cause me to dread it at times. And, it took its toll on my health over time, but
Well, that's the key. It needs to be your calling.
exactly. Yep.
And I bet you it feels really different doing astrology.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And using all of the skills that I learned through all of those, iterations of my life, they're all kind of coming into play with, with doing the EA Zoom meetings, and with doing other, technology related things. And and you're right, now I enjoy it, now it's fun. And still, I like you, it's hard for me not to go right to my computer and and start in, but now it's fun.
Exactly.
But
Hmm.
Saturn's all about timing as well, right? For me, I see Saturn as maturation, and you have to put the effort and work in. And it's kind of like, well, for me, Saturn in Virgo, mine's in the 12th house. So I have that Pisces kind of connotation with it. For myself, it was being, I had to do the work to build me up to a time now that I love what I do. I do astrology, and I also have a part-time job in a bookstore, which I love, absolutely love. And it's only at this, I say, in my mid 40s where I'm like, I love what I do. And it's taken its time. And I had to go through, though I enjoyed my job and I'm very diligent when I work and I will put my 101% in. But it's only now if I look back and think, now I enjoy it. That I thought I was enjoying it, but this is what I enjoy. So it's very much about timing as well. I feel with Saturn in Virgo, and if you put the effort in, there is a reward at the end.
Exactly. Exactly. And the other thing about it is that the Saturn return, this is the thing that I really learned, because I started my study of astrology before my Saturn return. I was in my early to mid 20s when I actually started, but studying it. But when I actually opened my practice, officially, when I said, okay, I am now an astrologer, that was my first Saturn return. And at my second Saturn return, the Venus star point was coming through to me leading up to that. And the book was published just subsequent to that, but all the material was coming through. And so my two Saturn returns have actually been quite meaningful and productive and enriching for me in again, from a standpoint of my work and loving it and giving me something really special,
It's like the
you know.
reward. I look at Saturn returns as you're either going to be forced into reviewing your work in the path that you're on, or there's a time of rewards for the efforts you've put in beforehand. So I feel with your journey, it's been very much about the rewards that have come in terms of, the first Saturn return being the astrology career that started, and then the second, the Venus point, information that's meant to come through to be shared with the world. On that
Right.
point, I would like to know a little bit more about Venus Star Point. I know Sue's going to add the videos of your previous talks with us, which I will definitely be watching. But I'm intrigued with Venus naturally because, like I mentioned before, I'm a Pluto and Libra generation, and Libra's ruler is Venus. So I know there's going to be a little bit more insights coming in for me personally. So if you can just share, if you can give us a little bit of a summary what the Venus star point is exactly.
So this is something else that came to me kind of magically, like astrology did. I wasn't looking for it. I had just finished my second volume of Mythic Astrology, and thought, okay, I'm done writing books for a while. I want a life, because when you're writing a book, you're so immersed and your head's in it all the time, and your mind is constantly churning about how, the next chapter, what you're going to say now, oh, I got to put this in, I got to put that in, I got to, whatever. So I was like, okay, I'm free. My mind is open. Then the Venus star point came along. I was not looking for it, but it came along. I was tracking Venus retrogrades actually for a lecture I was going to be doing. And I basically started looking at the Venus retrograde cycle at every single one of them for several ones back, so I could kind of get a sense of, how did it affect me? How did it affect the world? And I saw the five-pointed star, the perfect, pentagram. And I had heard that Venus orbited in a pentagram, but I didn't really know what that meant. But here it was, looking at the Venus cycle from the retrogrades. And then I just started, connecting the dots and asking more questions. Well, gosh, uh, looking at the star and looking at the five-pointed star first of our time that I was researching, and then going back in history, and then looking at mine and seeing, okay, you know, and doing a lot of thinking about the pentagram can be of Venus can be tracked from almost any point as long as you stay consistent with each point. So you could track it from the retrograde, you could track it from the heliacal rise, you could track it from when it went direct, But I chose to track it from the Cazimi point, which is when the Sun and Venus are absolutely married. They're as close as can be, called Cazimi, in the heart of the Sun, the planet. Because that's the seed moment, like our new moon every month, when the Sun and the moon are absolutely, as close can be. That's our new moon. Well, the Venus Cazimi is like every 9.5 months, Venus and the Sun come together and they make this Cazimi, or as the term that I use is star point, because it's one of the 5 points of the star, of the Venus star. The Venus star is the whole star. And then, it's got 5 points, but you're born at one of them. It's usually your prenatal, the prenatal Cazimi is usually your star point, almost always, 95% of the time it is. Sometimes, occasionally, you go to the next one, but there's some very special rules that I have made about that, about going to the next one. It's not just because it's closer, it has to do with where the Sun and Venus are when you were born. But I realized when I started looking at Venus star points of so many people, mine, all my relations, friends, people I was engaged with, and clients, celebrities, how well it really worked from a place of, I didn't even know what it was all about. But 400 and something pages later, it took me 7 years to put it all in the book. So the main difference between your natal Venus and the Venus star point is that the natal Venus can be found from wherever it happens to be on the day you were born. But in relationship to nothing else in particular. Where the Venus star point is the Sun, Venus, and the Earth all lined up. So it's like I always say, it's the laser beam of light, the heart or the love of Venus, shooting to the Earth, the body, which is also our body, physical. So it's that alignment. So that Cazimi is like the inner Venus, but it's with the Sun. So it's very bright. It's very lit. It's, I would describe it as kind of the joy that one derives from being alive. What really gives you purpose and joy, and not so much like soul purpose or, what am I really here for? It's more like, how am I engaging my heart in my life?
Okay. I love
What
that.
makes me feel alive? And,
Okay.
and yeah, that's really it. And I mean, there's so much you can do with it. I mean, I didn't realize it was going to have such a story to tell, but it really does. The more I researched it, the more information just kept coming and coming. And I've looked at historical cycles, because the long Venus transits are that the Venus star stays in a sign for about 100 years. Venus as a planet stays in a sign for about 1 month, when it's transiting around, except when she's retrograde, she'll stay in a sign maybe 3 months or 4. But it's her average, the average time Venus is in a sign is about a month. But the longer cycle of Venus is 100 years through a sign. And I found those fascinating too. So, the book basically is got 3 different parts to it. It's, what is a Venus star point? What is the Venus star? What's the mythology behind it? The astronomy, the astrology. How do you find it? And then what does it mean? Part 1 is a lot about, finding your own Venus star point and what does that say about you? another part is relationships, how the 5 star points of your life connect to other people and connect to the time that we're in right now. A lot of people alive right now in our age group have early Aquarius star point, or a late Capricorn. The younger ones have a late Capricorn. The ones that were born in the 70s have early Aquarius star points, either on their head or one of their arms or their feet. So Pluto's going over that, and you'll feel also the transits of different planets going over, those star points in terms of significant changes and shifts that you're making in your life. And then as the star of Venus transits itself through the signs, you'll see how as it slowly moves, it's a slow moving clock. Like I call it a kind of a star clock operating behind the zodiac. We don't see it, but it's working nevertheless. It'll click off your planets at different times in your life. So that's another really interesting thing to do, is to look at a person's chart and kind of at a glance, you can kind of see, if you know the pattern of where it's going, you can kind of see their whole life unfolding, how things are going to unfold for them, like at a glance for their life, which I think is kind of an amazing tool to have, to be able to do that. We can do that with the planets too, but you're tracking all the Pluto transits, you're tracking all the Neptune transits, all the Saturn transits, all the Uranus transits, and those fit in too. I mean, those sync up. You have to think of it as a very like the workings of a Swiss clock, or with the gears, because you've got different planets are all moving in their own orbital cycles, and then you've got the Venus star clock moving behind it, and the gears are moving different directions because the Venus star moves clockwise around the zodiac like the nodes do. So it's moving against the zodiac rather than, the way the planets move. And that's another factor of evolutionary astrology, is the use of the nodes. And I'm sure, though I haven't studied EA, I'm sure that a component of that is the fact that the nodes do go against the way the planets move. So it's a much more fateful kind of meeting when they do come together. I think it's the same with the Venus star.
Yeah, and the Venus star, what I've gleaned is that it moves about maybe a degree or two each consecutive one in a sign. So and you have alternating a Venus retrograde cazimi and a Venus direct cazimi, right? And
Yeah, in
and
8 years, in an 8-year period, you have the 5-pointed star, but you get 2 5-pointed stars in 8 years. You get 5 direct cazimis and you get 5 retrograde cazimis. But you're right, it moves in the 8-year cycle. Like right now, we just had Venus retrograde in Aries. Venus goes retrograde every 1.6 years, but it goes retrograde in Aries every 8 years. So the Aries retrograde well, each retrograde is important because it represents something unique. But the Aries Venus retrograde is important now because we're looking back to 2017 when it was last retrograde in Aries. And then before that, it was 2009. And before that it was 2001, and you can just keep going back 8 years for the Aries retrogrades to see, especially if the Aries star point is something that's important for you. You can look back at all the Aries retrogrades. So whatever your star point, you can look back at those and look at the 8-year cycles. Those tables are all in my book. of each star point, and also there's that one.
This book.
Yeah. And also at my website, there's a PDF called Find Your Venus Star Point, and you can download it. And that's a handy little thing to have, on your desktop or on your phone if you just want a quick reference guide to the star points.
It's awesome.
But
I use it all the time. I mean, and I've shared it with people and told them about it. So on the subject of the Venus star point being in Aries, it's moving backwards, and this one was at what, 237 or 2 something.
Yeah.
And then will we have one more in Aries, and then we're moving into Pisces.
Yeah. We'll have one more retrograde, I think, in Aries. And I think I've got my table here. We've got a couple more star points in Aries because one will be direct, a couple will be direct. It alternates direct. The last Aries star point is 2037, so that's in 12 years.
Okay, yeah.
And then following that will be 2041, the first Pisces star point. So, and we're also changing right now, this decade, we're shifting from the Scorpio, 100 years of the Scorpio star, to the Libra star, which we had the first taste of it in 2022, just briefly. And then this next one in 2026 will be back to Scorpio. But, the one in Scorpio in 2026 is really important, and we're kind of feeding into that now. There's a feeding principle with the Venus star. I call it the feet to the hands, or called the karmic star relationship. And Aries and Scorpio have a karmic relationship on the star. They're life mates as well, because they came in together approximately, and they'll go out together approximately. And so this Aries star point is feeding into the Scorpio star point that we're having at the end of 26. And and that's the last Scorpio star point we'll have in our lifetime. That'll finish the 100 years of the Scorpio star points. But what's really interesting about that one is it's also the first ever star point return of the United States, which was born with the 1 degree Scorpio star point, and this one will finish at 1 degree Scorpio, about 044 or something.
Wow.
So right at that one.
So
we're right now living between the Pluto return of the first ever Pluto return, and the 3 years later, the first ever star point return of the United States. And so we're in that transition period right now. And that's when I was saying before, Pluto and the Venus star are synced in that long cycle of 250 years, because that's what's happening now. And it's chaotic. We're in between, we just had the Pluto return. We haven't yet had the star point return, but we are in the middle of a lot of really heavy kinds of issues that could probably energetically match what was happening 250 years ago when the country was born. The intensity around the birthing process of the country, and all the different ideas that went into what it was going to be and who was going to make those decisions. And I think we're at that place now, like who's in control, who wants to birth the new nation, because it's sort of like the old one is collapsing.
yeah. And I find it very interesting that, once we get through these next 12 or so years, we'll be past the Venus star points ruled by Mars. And, into, one ruled by Venus and the other in Pisces, which is the exaltation of Venus. And so do you see that as, a little light at the end of the tunnel where maybe
That was from the very beginning when I started getting the information on the star, or as early as 2004, when I was working on the book. The glimmer of hope that I had was that that when we get to that we didn't have any Venus ruled signs on the five-pointed star of our times, and that since the 80s we've had 3 Mars ruled signs on the 5 points of the star, 3 being Mars. And also I have been made aware that the decans, when you use the decans of astrology, that a lot of the decans in the signs that the Venus star degrees are pointing to right now are also Martian decans.
wow.
So we have a lot of Mars in the world right now and very little Venus. And it's, you can see it, you can feel it. It's a very Martian. So yeah, one of the glimmers of hope that I had was that we're going to at least get into one Venus sign coming up, when Libra comes in. And then, a decade or so later, the Pisces point will come in, which is, Venus's exaltation. And, it starts at this, it starts at the end of the sign because it's moving backwards. So let me get something here. So we'll hit Venus's exaltation degree, which is late Pisces, which Venus was just at. Venus has been going back and forth 3 times now over this Venus exaltation degree. However, I don't think she got to revel in her full glory of exaltation because Saturn was with it the whole time. It was kind
And
of
still
like,
is.
it still is. Yeah, it still is. And the node is there too, the nodes. It's like, is this some karmic lesson that we have to digest right now?
I think so.
Right. Yes. Clearly it is. I mean, and it just occurred to me, since we've got a Gemini one as well, eventually that'll be go back to Taurus, right?
Yeah, eventually, but
Eventually, not for
I
a
won't
while.
be around to see that one.
I doubt that
Maybe.
we never know.
Yeah, you'll have to ask your grandchildren to report to us.
Or when we come back.
When we come back. Yeah.
With our
Oh
memories,
God,
with our
what
memories
what
intact.
are we coming back to? That's,
Right. Or when. I guess it
Yeah.
depends on when.
Yeah.
Um,
One of the
right,
things
I'm
I
gonna move.
thought of, well,
Yeah,
actually, one
please.
of the things I thought of when the Venus star signs come back was not, you know, I mean, war has been around for every generation throughout recorded history.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can go, if you want to take Greek myth, we can go all the way back to the Trojan War, which was sort of like the prototype of the war, for all wars. It lasted 10 years and it was made under false pretenses, including this is about Helen, but it's not. It was about the gold. It was about getting the minerals. It was about getting the wealth of Troy. And Helen was just the convenient excuse to go, to go invade this country. And so, history repeats itself over and over again, obviously. And also in the Trojan War, which was thought of as myth for a long time, but there's evidence that has shown up that it actually did happen. And the what was I going to say? The oh, it's like both sides had thought that God was on their side. The gods were on their side. You know, they all had gods speaking to them and saying, you know, we're with you. Oh, well, we're going to be victorious because God is on our side. And I suppose everybody that goes to war thinks that, you know, thinks, oh, God is behind me. I'm fighting the right and just war. But when it comes down to it, there's no right and just war. You know, I mean, maybe for defense, you know, you have to defend yourself if somebody attacks. But as far as invading, I don't know. I'm looking forward to that. We'll see what happens. I'm looking forward to more of the Venusian energy coming into the star. To see what the shift, you know, the actual shift will be from the Martian signs. But I do know that every time even a sign has shifted, when I've looked at the decades, that, you know, a star sign is phased out after its 100-year run, and then a new one has come up, that it has an enormous effect on society, on the culture, on politics, on religion, on everything. So it really is something that is working behind the scenes
Yeah, and
in a
that's
bigger
something you
way.
talk about in your book. I remember.
Yeah.
I remember reading. Yeah, and that's fascinating. That you know, I mean, I'm just in awe of how you came up with this and the correlations that you've made and just and how appropriate it is, you know, how you know, just seemingly logical it is. And okay, so one thing that I was thinking of that I remember reading in your book is that you said that you wrote the book and published it between the two transits of Venus.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
did you start it? You started it with the first one?
Venus coming to Earth. I mean, that was a time. The Venus transit doesn't happen that often. It only happens every 110 to 120 years. So this was the one for our lifetime, was in 2004, and then again it repeated in 2012. It happens in pairs. And those Venus transits are enormously important because the research I did on the Venus transit for the 1800s, the late 1800s, which was the one just prior to the one we had in the early 2000s, the people that were born in that 8-year interval of the Venus transits were the major movers and shakers of paradigm shifting thought makers for the 20th century. So it'll be interesting to see who was born between 2004 and 2012 that are going to be our future leaders, and thought, you know, there's going to be who are going to spearhead new ideas and thoughts, and, you know, where it's going to take us. So I think, you know, that's very important.
So the
One of the
last
ones that I really loved about, I'm very much, I also, besides mythology, I was very interested in psychology in the 70s. And I thought maybe I would go into psychology. I was very enamored of Jung, Carl Jung. And I had a lot of books on Jungian. I was very influenced by Jungian thought. And Carl Jung was born on the Venus transit of 1874. It was December of 1874. He was born in July of 75, but he was born in that cycle of that 9-month cazimi of the Sagittarius star point that was part of the Venus transit.
and so the last one, so the transits occur when Venus is on its own nodes, right? And the
Yeah.
last one
Mm-hmm.
was in Sagittarius.
Yeah, and this
the
one was in Gemini.
Yeah, yeah. So it,
And then the
so then
next
it
one will be in
alternates.
Sagittarius.
Okay,
They
yeah.
alternate. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. That's, I mean, there's
And
it's
with this one in Gemini, we got smartphones, we got texting, we got little messaging, we got Twitter, we got tweeting, we got handheld devices, we got little short, we got digitalized everything instead of, the way we were learning before and the way we were communicating before. And so this one was very Gemini. It was a revolution in that kind of Gemini technology.
A diversity of communication systems, right? In
Yeah.
terms of Gemini and in terms of what was available to users communicating.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I'll be
Right.
diving into your book for sure because this has intrigued my
Yeah.
research side of me has been piped. I'm like, okay.
and speaking of
You
books,
know, I have to say one more thing while we're just to loop back around to something we've already talked about, the Saturn and Virgo theme of, loving your work.
Hmm.
When that material started to come to me in 2004, and I was working on the research and the writing of the book until, 2011 when it was published, I could not wait to get up in the morning and rush into my work, my studio, my workplace where I was doing all my writing. And I lived in the perfect house in Santa Fe at the time. It was on it was on a big piece of land. I didn't have any neighbors close. I just looked out at the trees and the landscape, and it was just a very quiet, peaceful place just outside of town. And the whole book was conceived of and produced there in that setting. And I was just, my body, my spirit was filled with joy going to work on that book every day and wanting to learn more, wanting to know more, wanting to what's just, and all the information that was pouring in to me at the time. It was quite a process. So I just wanted to loop back to that Saturn and Virgo thing. It didn't seem like work at all. It just seemed like it was like happening on another level. Like I was completely, part of me I know was really out of my body during a lot of that process. Um, and sometimes I pick up the book now. I mean, all these years later, I pick up that book and I'll turn to I'll just open a page or something and I'll go, oh my God, did I really write this?
who wrote that?
just, just like, wow, what, you know,
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, you were
that's
channeling it
amazing.
or downloading
Yes.
it.
I think it was downloading. Yeah, it was definitely download. I call it the intelligence of Venus, whatever. The Venus transit was happening. Venus was closest to the Earth. It was, on its own nodes. I was asking questions and it was answering.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. But on that note, we will put a link for your book on the little blurbs that Sue's going to add. I have one of my favorite questions that I ask everybody. It's regarding books.
Okay.
So aside from astrology books, but if you want to mention astrology books, that's fine. I just wanted to know, were there any books in your life that you've read that have had an impact on you and that you would recommend the audience to read? Like it can be like one or two books that you found quite powerful.
Gosh, I had almost 1,000 books when I lived in Santa Fe, and I'm a bibliophile. I love going to bookstores, and I would always look for astrology books, but a lot of
Yeah.
bookstores don't have astrology books. I would call them used bookstores, new bookstores, but I never left without a book on something, So I have many subjects that I love. Mythology, psychology, spirituality,
Yeah.
meditation, Jung, um, feminist literature. I read a lot of feminist literature. At one time, The Mists of Avalon was my very favorite book. And I know the author has been you know, some of the books that I read that I loved at the time, you know, the authors have come into, you know, whatever politically incorrectness since then. But um, my early days, I read a lot of, in the 70s, I read a lot of Herman Hesse. I read Joseph Campbell, got involved with wellness, healing and wellness. I read a lot of Depak Chopra. I wrote this down because I was trying to think of all the different books that have influenced me.
Yeah.
Carolyn Myss, Paulo Coelho. I love his books. He's one of my favorite authors. Lately, I've been reading a lot of the feminine retelling of the feminist perspective, the retelling of the myths from a feminine perspective. And which was Myths of Avalon was a bit like that too, because it was a story of Arthur told by, you know, the female point of view. Margaret Atwood, Barbara Kinsolver. I like those authors. Madeline Miller, if you read Circe or The Song of Achilles, those are both really good recent books that I've read. Jennifer Saint, along the same genre, wrote Ariadne and Electra. She wrote another one too, but I haven't gotten to that one yet. What else have I been reading?
So you
Yeah,
like both
I
fiction and
think,
nonfiction. So you like both
yeah,
genres. Yeah.
yeah. For so many years, it was nonfiction because I was really working on my, you know, I was adding it to my body of knowledge. Also, dreams. I forgot to mention dreams. I have been a dreamer all my life. I have a huge library of books on dreams, and uh, I that was part of, you know, some of the tours we've done to Greece have involved the dream healing sanctuaries here, because they were very big. There was a very big following of the healing god Aesclepius, who healed through dreams. He was a student of Chiron, and but he surpassed Chiron, his teacher. And I think part of it, the reason that you know, the writers have maybe said that he surpassed Chiron is because he learned everything Chiron had to teach him, but then he also went on to include dreams. And of course, that was a big draw to Jung for me as well. I never was into Freud as much. I explored Freud a little bit, but Jung actually was a better fit. And so I before Venus came along, my astrology was basically kind of a weaving together of kind of spirituality, astro psychology and mythology and dreams and the archetypes. I read a lot of James Hillman too. Just um, yeah, people that people that really talked about this, you know, this consciousness in the psyche, and just really exploring it, like the way Jung had talked about how he was, even in his time, and boy, if he were alive now, what he would think. But even in his time, when how how he was commenting on the state of mankind or humankind, just not even wanting to explore the dimensions of one's own psyche, what's inside one's own mind. You know, that everybody is so external, they're so looking out there. And you know, I lived through the birth of the new age in the 80s, and all the years and decades following that, and all the New Age kind of thought. So I had a lot of books on that too. But some of that is true and real and right and authentic, because a lot of it takes from ancient wisdom anyway, that's just kind of been repackaged and, put into a modern format.
Context. Yeah.
But a lot of it is just kind of garbage, And so you have to really, Saturn and Virgo, you have to be very discerning too
Discernment.
about
Yep.
discernment.
Oh, I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. There's a lot of stuff
But
that's
yeah,
I work in the bookshop, and when people will request like, oh, what books do you recommend? Of course, no, it's a personal interest. So my question always is, what is your interest? Because when you say, what do you recommend? It's like, well, what are you drawn towards? Are you drawn towards psychology? Are you looking more towards the psyche? Are you looking more towards, or how can I be, I don't know, happier? How can I manifest something? Or just whatever it is. There's got to be a particular genre that you're linked to. And it's interesting, if somebody's never heard, like never dived into the material, the first point for me for people is always The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. That's one that's people that don't know anything about spirituality. I'm like, read The Alchemist. And if you get the gist of that, then it's something like The Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield, which I thought was quite powerful, and it still is to this day.
yeah,
But you're right, there's so many different, it depends on what you're drawn towards to what you will feel is useful for you. I personally didn't find, for example, The Secret for me didn't work. Like meaning The Secret works for people, but it was just I was like, no, that you're taking away what's the word? You're taking away it's all like you're taking away the responsibility you have in your life. You're not just going to manifest whatever you think you want. It's just not going to turn up on your doorstep. That's just not how it works. That's why I went more towards somebody like Esther and Jerry Hicks, who talked more about the
yeah,
emotional connection to something. So
yeah.
it's interesting to yeah, like we could be here doing another talk show just to do with books, which I'm sure we can do the next time. But no, I like how well read you are, and you've
I used
taken.
to want to work in a bookstore. At one time in my life, I thought I'd love to work in a bookstore so I could read all these books. And I talked to somebody once that worked in a bookstore, and she said, "We don't have time to read books."
I can validate that. I get that. I work there part time. I wish all we did was serve customers and read books. No, no. I do that in my spare time. I read books in my spare time. But
Right,
no, it
exactly.
is joyful. I do enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah. But
So,
there's something, I don't know, there's something comforting about being around all those books. You know,
There really
I had to
is.
leave my library in Santa Fe. I didn't bring, I brought like a handful of books with me to Greece, but I've already collected so many since I've been here. And I keep thinking, how did I keep getting up? Where did all these books come from? But
Yeah.
they come to me, they just,
Likewise.
it's what I do. But
uh,
yeah,
same.
yes,
And is that a Saturn and Virgo thing? Maybe, I don't
It
know.
has to
maybe
be.
ruled by Mercury,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
want
I
to keep learning, we want to keep perfecting, we want to keep knowing more,
Yep, exactly
Well,
that.
my Venus, Sue told me earlier, my Venus star point is 1 degree Virgo. My Mercury is 0 degrees Virgo. So I can see where the love of knowledge and learning and yeah, will
Oh,
forever be there.
definitely,
Yeah.
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, that's a beauty. That's a very lovely
Mm.
configuration. Hmm.
That it is. Yeah. So
Yeah.
my favorite question to wrap up is, what do you do in your spare time?
Saturn in Virgo has spare time.
I know.
Oh, I love movies.
Hmm.
I love walking by the sea. I live not too far from the sea here. I go on walks. I'm also a photographer. I took pictures. I have a very strong Neptune as well. I've got the Saturn in Virgo, but I balance it with Neptune because Neptune's very angular in my chart, and just really connected to a lot of my planets. And so photography has been a huge love and a pastime. So I go out with my camera. Well, now it's my phone, but I used to have cameras,
Yeah.
the actual with the lenses and everything.
Yeah. Do you have a
It
favorite
was
subject?
quite a deal to take all that out. But
Yeah.
walking, doing landscape photography and
Mm.
just, yeah, now it's a lot easier with the phone. You just have your phone but yeah, photo, swimming in the sea, walking, nature. I love nature. Cooking. I love to cook, and I go to the farmers market here. We have in my neighborhood. There's two farmers markets that happen on 2 different days of the week, and I buy all my stuff. I buy almost all my week's supply of stuff there. The majority of stuff there, and then I supplement at the grocery store with a little bit more. But I'm always amazed at how reasonably priced it is, and how fresh everything. It's all uh yeah, I still love the food here. And so yeah, cooking, going to movies, walking, photography, um that kind of thing, swimming.
That's great. And sounds like you actually make time to do all of those things too. Oh, I also wanted to ask you real quickly before we finish up. Do you have some workshops? I know you just finished one up. Do you have any coming up that you would like for me to add to the description?
Yeah, I'm going to I just finished 2 classes for Kepler College, one on astro mapping. That was another passion of mine for a
Oh,
long time in
yeah.
astrology. I
We
work
didn't
with
even
Jim
talk about
Lewis.
that.
No, we didn't. We'll have to save that for another
Next
conversation.
time,
But
yeah.
yeah, I love astro mapping, and so I've been doing relocation astrology for a very long time as well. Uh, I just finished a class for Kepler in that, and then also on the Venus star, a master class on Venus. And there will be more next year in the winter semester. I'll be teaching another mapping class and another Venus class. Those will be in January. And then next year in September, I'll be at UAC. And
Awesome.
they haven't informed me yet. I submitted 3 lecture topics, so I don't know what they're going to choose yet. So I don't know what I'll be lecturing on yet, but it's probably one of them. I'm sure will be on the Venus star. And what the other ones they choose will be on, we don't know yet.
Awesome. Well, Rav and I have talked about meeting at UAC in 2026, so maybe we'll see you there too.
Yes, I hope so. I do hope so. Yeah,
Yeah, that would be awesome.
I'm looking forward to going there and uh, meeting up with everybody because I'm so far away now. I don't get to the States that often. And it will be really nice to see everybody together there. Although with UAC, you don't ever see everybody
No,
because there's so many people
big.
there. It's hard to, it's kind of random who you run into. But anyway, I hope to see you there.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well,
Where do both
I
of
know what
you
you mean.
live?
Well, I was just gonna say I'm with you, Ariel. I'm in actually London. I'm in England, London.
Okay.
So yeah, so we're
Okay.
nearer, we're closer. But yeah,
And
everybody else is in America.
I'm in California, central coast
I
of California.
Central Coast I love, and I also love London.
Yeah.
So Rav, I'm going to be in London later this summer. So
Oh,
maybe we can
please.
hook up.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course. I would love that. It's actually interesting where everybody that I've been interviewing, they're coming to London, and I'm like, let's meet for coffee.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's nice
I
to meet
loved going to
physically.
the astrology shop there. That was such a treat to go
It's
there and
still
see my
there.
books there, you know.
Yeah. Yes, it's still there. It's a great shop, yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
Yeah.
thank
oh,
you so much, Ariel, for today. Honestly, it's been wonderful getting to know you and getting to know a little bit more about the Venus start point. And we'll definitely be doing this again, won't we, Sue?
yep, absolutely, absolutely. It's
Well, yeah, thank you for having me and being so interested in this because, it's something that when I received the information and when I got it, it was so exciting to me and I wanted to put it down in a book, but I really truly didn't know how it was going to hit other astrologers, if they were going to even understand it or be interested in it or want to know about it. I, and at that point, I really, it, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
I
Mm.
just was so charged by it myself that I had to just keep, you know, doing it.
and that's the key. I
Yes.
really think that's the key is, doing it for yourself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
So thank you for your interest in it. I mean, you have
Uh,
a actually, Sue, you have quite a bit of knowledge about it, and I know Rob,
Yes.
you're gonna get
I
get
will
with it
I'll
pretty
be
soon.
getting into this. Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
I am fascinated. I mean, I am, and I, so I have a Gemini moon in addition to all my Virgo in the third house. So I'm, like always curiosity could
Me
be my
too.
middle name, I suppose. But yes,
It must be the square to from Virgo to Gemini because I'm also very curious just about learning. I like to learn and just expand my knowledge. And this is just something else that just gives me more insight into astrology.
yeah,
And yeah,
Right.
even if it's just from yeah, personal stuff, but I find whatever you're interested in that it ends up helping clients in some way. I very much believe in vibration and energy, how we attract clients at a particular point for a particular reason, and then we're always helping one another. It's not just me helping the client; they're also giving me knowledge and experience and something I need to learn from that particular time. And right now, yeah, I feel this has come for me at a time where I need to just look into it a little bit more.
we've had
I wanted to say hi to the furry guy there too, because he or she has been with us for most of the
he has
time.
been,
So I
yep.
wanted to acknowledge.
This is my new old kitty. This is Bitty Kitty, and
Kitty, kitty.
Okay.
he's recently come to live with us, but he's 16 years old and he's just the sweetest guy. And he loves Zoom meetings.
Yeah, I
And
know. I miss my cats. I had a cat, the female cat that I had. I've always had cats in pairs. I've had three sets of cats in pairs, a male and a female. And the female cat would always try to sit on my keyboard or be right on the computer. And she was always there when I was working on charts and even writing, typing out the books. And I said, "Are you training to become an astrologer?" And one day, my friend said, "No, she's already been an astrologer. She's she's teaching you."
she's helping you, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, yep. They do. They're, they're special, that's for sure. Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah. So again, thank you for having me, and I'll look forward to whenever we get together again. And
absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been an honor and a privilege, and I'm just so, this was so much fun.
Yeah.
thank you. Same for me. Yeah.
Absolutely.